We start our days as a firm before the sun comes up.
We turn the lights on in the research department a little before 5. It's dictated to us by the New York clock.
There's a research meeting that starts off the day at 5:30. I find that I'm much more attuned to what the firm is doing if I'm there at that meeting.
We think that you can have an entrepreneurial culture, a culture that encourages stars and yet still work as a team. In our business, where you can really build small franchises and they all will add up to a much greater piece of the sum of the parts, you really need teamwork in order to do that, because the integration of all the business units, we think, is one of the more critical keys to our success.
That's the purpose of that 5:30 sales meeting, is to make sure that we have the whole organization, focused on whatever the priority, of the day, the week, the month might be. We're 1,200 people, so your contribution as an individual does not get lost. You can come here, you can still have an impact as an individual, be recognized for that impact, and be rewarded for it.
Montgomery is very much like an athletic team in that everybody is involved with what everybody else is doing, and everybody comes in not only to play, but to win. People who are successful here like to compete, and they like to win, and as long as we win our fair share of the time, it makes this a very pleasurable experience. If we always lost, I suspect I'd be growing wine somewhere. We have a culture here which encourages self-expression, which says to you, if you can do it, we will allow you to do it.
It's almost electric way the place operates. Competing well, providing the service, growing the firm, all of these passions are what makes Montgomery tick. We have enormous ability to sell stock. We can do financings and place equity well. We have great research, equivalent to all of the bulge bracket firms. We have all the capabilities a customer needs, and when we walk into a room with other investment banks, they notice.
One chooses an investment banker not purely for their investment banking skills, but for their research skills and the commitment to follow with the company and have a pretty close relationship. If I were to do it again, I'd absolutely choose Montgomery Securities. We chose them all along the way, from the mezzanine to the public offering to the second follow-on offering. With this agreement to be acquired by Cisco, clearly we had to have investment banking support and opinion, and so again, we turned to Montgomery because we'd had such good experience. And this was a very fast deal. It's the biggest deal ever done in Silicon Valley in technology. Over the weekend, they spun on a dime, they assembled the team together, they came down immediately, and they worked at this frenetic pace that our lawyers, as well as our own people, were working to consummate the biggest deal ever done in the fastest time ever done to a definitive agreement.
When I started in 1985, we had 17 people in corporate finance. Today, we have more than 200, and by the end of 1997, we expect to have 275 people. This reflects growth in San Francisco, Boston, and New York, as well as expansion in the high-yield marketplace. We've been very active in the equity markets. It has been a wonderful market to please clients in. Our bankers are responsible for making sure all the services of this firm, which are considerable, are delivered to the benefit of that relationship.
Montgomery has had an exceptional focus on the small and emerging growth company. It knows how to follow them, understands when their problems are short-term problems or indeed fatal problems. Montgomery has a feeling of how to position a company effectively in the marketplace, and Montgomery throws the single best investor conference in the world, and having that kind of exposure just enhances your entire status as a company.
We think that research is the hub of the wheel at Montgomery, and that all of our product flow, both for the brokerage business and investment banking department, comes out of the efforts of our research analysts. We're just like a giant detective agency in the research department, trying to find out who's doing it and who's going to win as a result of it and who's going to lose. Business begets business. If we're successful and make an impact on a stock in terms of the volume we trade, then we can, quote unquote, own that stock for a foreseeable future. That's the most fun, if we can put it all together. firm's always had a team spirit that transcends activities outside of the office.
After hours, we spend as much time really trying to bring people together, in an informal, non-business setting, really, again, so that we know each other.
Another day at the office in Montgomery.
Nobody's getting bored. Nobody feels like what we do is becoming routine.
Today, Montgomery represents a very unique position in the whole structure of Wall Street. We follow the broadest array of growth companies, and we have an independent institutional brokerage business from our investment banking operation that makes us truly unique in the world of Wall Street. We did this by implementing a strategy of focus and specialization in research and corporate finance, but built a bulge bracket distribution system around the world, as well as a very large block trading activity. This strategy worked in the 90s. Our revenue has gone from roughly $100 million to a little over $700 million last year, and we believe we'll be at the billion-dollar mark within the next year or two. We also identified the money management business as an attractive area, so we started 3 divisions in 1990. Montgomery Asset Management, we've recently sold, had $7 billion plus of assets. The prime brokerage activity that we started has over $3 billion of custodian assets. And our private client department, which services wealthy individuals, has a little over $10 billion in assets today.
Montgomery's core competencies are financial, high-tech, biotech, and consumer retail, of which restaurants are a niche. And they, I believe, understand the restaurant business better than any investment banking firm in America today, in fact, in the world, consequently. Montgomery epitomizes our company's credo. They measure performance and not effort. If you're a performer, if you're a rainmaker, you can do better at Montgomery than you can anyplace else.
Montgomery brings to the banking industry long experience in mergers and acquisitions. It brings good research, brings good advice. It brings a deep understanding of how the markets work and how the markets react to bank mergers. That's why Wells Fargo chose Montgomery when it acquired First Interstate.
While the Wells Fargo First Interstate merger was large in terms of size and had a great deal of notoriety, we're particularly proud that our client base goes back a long time with many companies, and we've done multiple transactions with several of them.
But I think even more importantly, Montgomery brings a passion, brings a commitment of senior people, and it brings a level of dedication that is really unmatched by any other investment bank.
In terms of sales, we have 60 professional salesmen, which again cover the entire institutional universe. There are 200 accounts, which account for 80% of the total institutional revenue generated in this country. So in terms of sales and distribution, that staff of 60, again, is equivalent to all the biggest firms in New York. If we look at the trading platform in terms of Autech's trading statistics, again, in our areas of the economy, so technology, healthcare, financial services, the consumer retailing sector, we're typically in the top 5. So in fact, there is a new bulge bracket serving growth companies, and Montgomery is one of the premier competitors in that business.
Our international distribution capability is equally as impressive. We have 17 international salesmen doing business with institutions in over 20 countries.
They understood our needs, they understood our business. They did a great job taking us public. They did our secondary, they were involved in our acquisitions. They've given us great trading support, they've given us good research support. They've continued to put a deal flow at our feet. I believe that Montgomery has used their leverage and their clout very, very effectively. It appears to me that as each year passes, they're a bigger player in the marketplace.
Pound for pound and man for man, I would put this trading department, and we have, up against anybody's on Wall Street. You have 100 people in a room all yelling and screaming at each other in a very, what we would call controlled madness. It's just like a symphony. I mean, everybody knows exactly what they're doing, and everything gets done, and we make very few mistakes, and we transact an enormous amount of volume. If the other side of a trade exists, we'll find it, and if it doesn't, we'll provide it. We've now built a trading capability that many or most of the large institutions in this country rely on. We're in a position where we can dominate.
Over the past several years, Montgomery has been one of the top 5 trading firms in every area of our focus. Last year, our brokerage revenues were up over 34%, well ahead of the shares traded on both exchanges. Our investment banking revenues were over 100% ahead of the year before. We did roughly $20 billion of equity offerings and $22 billion plus of M&A activity. We were the #1 IPO firm in terms of number of transactions last year and number 3 in total equity transactions in Wall Street. We set out to build a very, very strong management team that could bring this firm into the 21st century with not only intelligence and planning, but real depth. We've increased the number of seats we have in the New York Stock Exchange from 6 to 9. We've invested $60 million on the new Windows NT platform and intend on spending roughly the same amount this year. We've increased our square footage from roughly 200 to 400,000 square feet, including offices that were open in both Boston and New York. And we've expanded into the high-yield marketplace with a world-class group. This growth should create the foundation for Montgomery to become one of the top 5 firms on Wall Street.